Hey everyone, Wiley here with Wiley's Wanderings. It's time to go on a new adventure. I'm on my way to go pick up Mr. TSG himself, and we're headed down to Southern California to hit up some new layouts, meet some new people, do some new operating sessions, and just maybe get into a few shenanigans. So if you're interested, come along with us and we'll see what happens.
Hi, I'm Paul Deis, and welcome to the Southern Pacific Railroad's Santa Margarita sub. I model the SP from San Luis Obispo to San Miguel, California, as it was in 1949. The layout is designed for fun for me to build and to be scenically pleasing, but mainly to do operations. Really, my favorite thing to do is to share the railroad with others and have them come work a day of the Southern Pacific.
Paul has a great layout that's 3 decks around much of the room. You can see staging on bottom, scenery on the second and third decks, and he accomplishes all these decks with only 1 turn of a helix. The rest is all grades and it runs up and down the room. He took 2 bedrooms and combined them together, and he has like a great layout space now right in the front of his house. It's a nice room, it's climate controlled, it's great to be in there and hang out. The scenery is really nice. He's still working on it just like any other model railroad. As you can see, one of the hazards in the room is the ceiling fans. If you stand up too fast or wave your arms in the air, well, you get reminded they're there. Throughout the day, we really enjoyed moving around Paul's layout. There are a few pinch points, but it wasn't too tight. Really, the only problem was around the yard, where the yardmaster had to be, and then, well, you had to get past him. And he had to be in the mood to let you get past him. But otherwise, mostly moving around and being in the room was great. And here we have our friend Seth, who is dispatching out in the crew lounge. You know, for a layout that only fills 2 small bedrooms in a regular house, we kept 8 people busy. 6 people in the layout room, 1 person dispatching, and sort of a runner and extra engineer back and forth. Paul's layout's set in 49, and he really wants to do all steam, but it's taking him a while to accumulate brass steam that will pull his trains up the grade and run well. And for those of us that tinker around with brass, we know how long it can take to get things to run well. So he's taken a few liberties with early generation diesels, but hey, that didn't stop us from enjoying ourselves. I really like the layout area that Paul models because I went to college in San Luis Obispo, so a lot of the scenery is pretty familiar from when I was living down there. Another thing to note about the layout is Paul hand-laid all of his track, including the switches, and everything ran flawlessly. We had no derailments, no problems. It was amazing. I ran a stock extra and I had to stop at 3 locations, and Paul's done this great thing where at each stock loader there's a button you push, and it plays one of several random sound files that are all sort of livestock loading and ranch type sound files, and each sound file is just long enough to simulate loading a car. So you back up a car, play the sound, wait for it to finish, and then back up the next car and do it again. Seems a little repetitive, but you know, it was cool, and it really it made the time go by. It was fun. Paul got the sounds from a company called Fantasonics, and apparently the owner of the company used to do sound design for Disney. So I was pretty impressed with what the sounds played. Because this layout is all grades, you wind up running helper service quite often and putting the steam engine or other engine on the back of the train. Paul's locos were speed matched very well, and we had no problems doing helper service. Nobody got pushed off the rails or pulled back. It all went well. Here we have the Grand Poobah talking about running his train forward, because he was very proud he knew how to push the button. Normally, we don't let him do this by himself, unsupervised.
I ran a helper up the hill here, and I need to turn it on the Y now.
All right.
It's really fun. It's a cool layout to run on.
While they're not steam power, the 2 demo Jeeps on the layout ran flawlessly for me. And you know, I'm a sucker for a good demo paint scheme. One of the cool things about the stock train is, if you moved it a little too rough, one of the cars would start mooing at you, and the cows were very unhappy with you. We used radios to talk to the dispatcher, and, as usually happens with me, I started to get sassy with the dispatcher, and well, my train got delayed a lot.
We just finished an op session with 8 people, and we ran for 4 hours and moved a lot of freight and a lot of passengers, and everybody seemed to have a good time.
Hi, my name's Dan Wexler, and welcome to the Hamlin and Valley Central Railway. What you're looking at is a 18 by 20 foot double-deck railroad point to point with switching almost exclusively.
So Dan's layout was an interesting layout, as it was definitely designed as an old school layout. I think he said he started it back in 1979, and the way it was laid out, you can tell it's tight aisles and, you know, tight curves, but he definitely updated it and kept it current so that, you know, now when you go and you do operations on it, there's a ton of operations on it that kept, I think, 4 or 5 of us busy. The layout is mostly scenic, and actually Dan, unlike most modelers, started with the top deck and then later added the bottom deck so his wife, who was in a wheelchair, could watch the railroad and see what was going on with Dan. I thought that was really cool. So much of the layout is a Santa Fe moving freight around San Bernardino, and it's not a prototype I have a lot of experience with, so it was cool to see some of the towns and work with different rolling stock, cabooses, and everything that I normally see. Usually I'm doing Southern Pacific stuff. And here we see a handsome specimen carefully examining cars in the yard. The yard is on the bottom level, so you get to sit in a chair, which is pretty nice when you've been standing for several days in a row. And here's a great shot of how I have not yet mastered the art of uncoupling cars even when they are right in front of my face. Maybe in another 7, 8, 12 years I'll figure it out. Dan's layout is an old garage, even smaller than what most of us have now for a 2-car garage. But he had a train that I ran that started on the far side of the garage and basically worked its way back over to that yard. And you know, it actually took a lot longer than I thought. So again, just another example of how you can get a lot done in a small amount of space.
Well, hi, I'm Dean Deis. We're at the Santa Susana Pacific Model Railroad Club. We are located in a Southern Pacific Class 22 depot built in 1903. We're located in the freight room of the depot. We're about 25 by 50 feet or so of mainline track. We modeled the SP coastline from LA all the way up to Northern California and Dunsmuir. And today we've been doing operations for SoCalOps 2022. My job was dispatcher. We dispatched via track warrants today. We ran about 15, 16 trains, had 9 guys, they all had fun.
So this model railroad is in a freight depot just like our freight depot in Santa Clara, but I'll tell you, I am jealous of their setup. Since they're not the same sort of historical landmark, I guess, they get to have a regular ceiling with insulation and air conditioning. Man, I tell you, it's boiling in our depot in the summer. Again, though, this was a long, linear room, which is kind of perfect for a model railroad, and they made a great use of their space, and their scenery is excellent. That is something that's difficult to achieve, is having amazing scenery over such a large layout, because it is a lot of ground to cover. As we can see, someone let Mr. TSG loose again, and here he is wandering about the layout. Gotta have those nice mountains to divide the layout in half so you don't see the back. Who doesn't love a nice big trestle? This was a good approach to where they had a turnaround loop back in the corner of their room, where it's actually not fully obvious you just have a train going in a circle. Now they have a really cool lighting system that actually does the full day-night cycle using red, green, blue, and white LEDs. It looks like it runs on a DMX style controller, which comes from the World of Theater lighting. This is something I'd love to play with in the future on our club layout, or even maybe at my home on my layout. But the effect from midday sun through the evening to nighttime is great. And they also have it coordinated so that the lights inside their buildings come on when it goes to night. What you see in the linear lights here running down the aisleways is actually the color-changing light system. They're circuit board LED strips that have the multiple colored lights on them. The lighting setup was custom built by one of their members, and he did all the computer programming as well. And this was just back on a staging track, and I love Western Pacific F units, so I had to take a picture.
Hello there, this is Al Dauman. I'm the superintendent and owner of the Bernie, Reading, and Western Model Railroad. Proto-freelanced, set in Northern California in 1947. You can see on here on the map, we run from Eureka, we go through Reading, through Bieber, and up to Alturas, and then we go south to Sacramento. The model portion of the railroad is just from Reading to Bieber. Originally that's as far as the railroad went, and we have staging is Alturas, New Bieber, Eureka, which is in the closet, and Sacramento underneath here. This is our dispatching area, and this is where we have joint authority negotiated with the boss in terms of the laundry room. Timetable train order, 1-to-1 clock. This is a 10 by 12 bedroom. I get two comments about the railroad which are related. One, boy, the aisles are narrow. And number two, you've gotten a lot of railroad in the space here. So that's what we have. Even though we're a 105-foot main line, we've got 2 yards. Reading is the main yard at the lower level, and this whole lower level is in yard limits. Eureka comes in through the closet, Sacramento, and then out this way up to climb to the rest of the layout. There's a freight house here in East Reading, Reading Oil Company. The railroad is actually loop to loop, point to loop, and point to point. So when we operate, it's point to point, but there's a reverse loop on the lower level, which turns into a branch line, and there's a reverse loop at the upper level, which is also a branch line. When I started, my son was 10 and he wanted to run trains. We never run trains, we really only operate. Okay, so now we're transitioning to the other side of the railroad, and as we left Reading Yard at the lower level, we come up to Helper. That's the only town on the railroad that isn't a real California town. And this is the place when we start the session. Every other session, we run a turn that goes from Reading Yard to Helper, and we work the stock pens, the house track, and the packing house. There's a 2% grade here. Trains take on water. Then we go up the 3% grade. I didn't know what a Nolix was, but this is a Nolix. As we climb our way from the lower level to the upper level, we go through the knot under, and then we go back to the other aisle here, which then is Goose Valley. The Terry Lake branch is through here, and the Coble Mountain branch is on the right. That's a 5% grade up to the logging area. We then continue up to the town of Bernie. There really is a sawmill in Bernie, and from here on it's flat. Then we go through connecting around to the other side to the town of Bieber, which is where our second upper yard is. The focus on that yard is livestock, and then the track continues into Alturas, which is staging in the laundry room, and is also New Bieber, which is considered to be just across the way, and that's the Great Northern and Western Pacific.
Hi, Mike Osborne here. Welcome to the Santa Fe Pacific. It's a fictitious line from Ogden, Utah to Denver, Colorado, which is owned jointly by the Santa Fe and Southern Pacific. I modeled the year I hired out with Southern Pacific in May of 1979. I currently still work for Union Pacific in the coast of California. This is my CTC panel on the layout, and it's based on the Union switch and signal system circuits. And it encompasses from left to right, from division all the way to base. They have numbers for the switches, so that would be normal and reverse. And the signals to let somebody go eastbound on my layout, you would click a right direction, and hence put it in the center, it goes red. It's not exactly prototypic, but I'm not a computer guru, so I have to do what I can fix.
So Mike's layout was definitely a new experience for me because Mike is a prototype railroader, and he has built the layout and designed the operations very much like the prototype. There was really a learning curve for me to get to understand his switch lists and some of the other things, how it worked on the railroad, and it was a little daunting at first, but I'll tell you, after you spent some time working with it, you definitely got the hang of it, and it was a lot more enjoyable. Another cool thing Mike had in yards like this one is he had little, what he called handbrakes, that would pop up from underneath the layout to keep your cars from rolling downhill, because again, he has a lot of grades just like some of the other layouts, and the cars don't stay in place. Another thing about his layout is he has maximized every bit of real estate he has. His upper deck is, well, it's got to be 7 feet up there because it was over my head and I'm 6'2". Now he has plenty of stools and other little ladders you can use to climb up to see your train and work on the upper deck, but that is the first time I've actually had a railroad go over my head.
This is a real EMD drop step off of like a GP9. And you can just see how big these things are in solid. And I use this, I have a real handholds I got from the car department, and you can I pull myself right up on here.
He has a real wide variety of scenery where it starts in towns and industrial down low and then comes up and you're in the mountains. Like as he talks about, it goes from Denver to, I think it was Ogden, Utah. I thought these were really cool, these actual interlocking levers. Turns out there is a place online that makes them, and they actually have an indent and a second little release lever, so you actually have to work them like a regular interlocking lever. I would love to have a project where I could use those things. It would be fun. And here we have a photo of the first auto racks going through the Old West. A lot of Santa Fe power on the layout and a lot of SP power. And you know, it all ran really well. And some of the engines had a ton of momentum, so it definitely added to the challenge of operating and switching. This layout is dense and tightly packed. It's in his garage, but it's not all of his garage. In fact, while he has a helix in the middle of the layout to get between decks, there's also so much action on that top deck way up in the air that there's another helix that's actually out in the hallway that has 1 or 2 turns in it to get trains back to the right level. That was another first for me, is seeing a stacked helix. For being tight quarters, you were able to run big cars like those auto racks and box cars without any problems. I was surprised at how broad the radiuses were going around the layout. Apparently the blue flags weren't quite enough for this worker, as we see him taking a snooze.
This is like the real brewery located in Van Nuys, California. It has its own support yard. So it has the brewery buildings. All the tracks are hidden under the layout where the cars actually spot. So it's very much like the real railroad. It automatically restages itself during a session. And it's a lot of fun for operators. It's just a ton of fun. We had a guy here this morning. He had a great time. He didn't want to leave. We had to finally just literally kick him out.
Did you see that, folks? I can read.
This is one of the highest points on the layout. This is CP Alta. And this is in mountain country. I didn't want a lot of switching up here because of obviously the area, but we're up 72 inches above the floor. Siding here, a brand new bridge I just put in. I'm currently redoing every bush on the layout. I went from these to these. Some of this layout's getting to be up to 30 years old, by the way. There's a river up here. It comes down this way, goes out of CP Canyon, and comes into CP Slater at this point.
All right, now we have Jeff Abbott's N-scale layout, which I tell you, this was probably my favorite layout of the whole weekend. This is out in Jeff's garage, but he has sealed up the garage so it's nice and climate controlled. He had an air conditioner in there, and there were 6 or 7 of us in there, and it was nice all day. Jeff's modeling the SP that goes over Cascade Summit. This was a blast to run. We were running long trains with multiple units up front. We had mid-train helpers. Everything ran smoothly, nothing derailed, nobody picked switches, none of the cars fell over. It was great. And Jeff must have put in hours on speed matching all of these engines to work well together because they ran perfectly. There was no surging, you didn't see any bouncing in the couplers, and when you had mid-train helpers cut in, they ran at the exact same speed you were running at. So kudos to Jeff for how well he did. This is another multi-deck layout, goes around the garage with the center peninsula. It does have one major helix, and normally helixes are long and boring, but Jeff's actually been pretty creative that you go in and out of this helix and you have sort of a mid-level using the center peninsula in the garage. So your train isn't lost forever like it is on some layouts with a really tall helix. Jeff had also cut holes or viewing windows in the fascia around the helix and on 2 different sides, so depending on where you were in the layout, where you were coming from or going to, you could check on your train quite easily. This drag is coming out on the center peninsula now, and as you can see, Jeff, even after 15, 20 years, still has more scenery to do. No layout has ever done, especially when they start growing in size. The scenery on the upper deck is almost all complete, and the mountains look great. I mean, there's a lot of scenes where you're running over the river. There's a nice big trestle. Everything is very photogenic. I mean, I really enjoyed myself. He's got padding on the floor. It was comfortable, it was nice, it was fun. It was great. Another cool aspect of his layout is the trains restage themselves. You start in staging on one end, and it's double-ended, so you come out, run the layout, and you come back into the back end of staging. So all of your through trains are ready to go from one operating session to the next. Jeff also had a really good setup for the yard ladder going in and out of staging, where you just pushed one button and it lined all the turnouts for you. This seems like an obvious solution to having a big yard ladder, but I haven't run into it very often on very many layouts. These early open auto racks were pretty unique in N-scale. I don't think I've seen these before running on different layouts. And as you can see, Jeff's gone through the effort to fully load them with cars, so they're not just running around empty. Jeff had a ton of different contests on the layout, from auto racks to airplane fuselage, lumber loads, boxcars, to there's even a beet train in N-scale with live loads for the sugar beets, which is really impressive. Apparently it has fallen over in the helix once or twice, and that involves a long game of 52 pickup. Here we see the dispatchers running the railroad in another room in the house. Again, we talked to them over radios, and I may or may not have started to talk back to the dispatcher as the day went on. Jeff had some of his regular operators there to help us out, and they were really cool. And they did a good job of helping us, but not, doing things for us, so we got to really experience what was going on. This train has now got mid-train helpers and is rounding the curve to get up over the summit. And like I said earlier, the mid-train helpers ran at the exact same speed as your lead units. Also, all of the signals on Jeff's layout were operational and controlled by the dispatcher. In case you missed it, there was a rare TSG mogul sighting back there. I thought this was a really unique idea for the uncoupler. I've seen a couple of people try to do lights for the uncoupler, but this is the first one I've seen where it's been shaped so that light is going to fall right exactly where you need it. This is Eugene Yard, the focal point of the layout, and obviously the biggest single piece of it. And those are those yard panels for the staging yards I talked about. One button throws all the turnouts you need to get down the line.
We're here at Jeff Abbott's railroad in, actually I forget, because this is Valencia, Santa Clarita. A very nice N-scale layout. My first visit here, and really enjoyed it. It's really well thought out and well done. Very nice operating scheme, and he's a very nice host. So it's been a great day, and it's a great getaway day before we head home after an exciting weekend here at SoCalOps in the greater LA basin.
And at the end of the day, I didn't want to go home. I was having so much fun, even though we had a 5-hour drive back to home base. I'll tell you, thanks, Jeff. It was a great ops session, and I would happily come down again. So that wraps up another Wiley's Wanderings, and again, I had a great time. Met some old friends and got to hang out, made new friends and had a good time with them, and overall just really enjoyed myself. These weekends recharge me, you know, from work and life and other things going on. They inspire me to work on a new project at home or maybe do something with the club. And it also inspires me to, you know, try to outreach a bit more to people in our club or maybe in our area that might be interested in model railroading. It's just a lot of fun to share this stuff with people. If you can find an event, you know, say within an hour, maybe even 2 hours, if you don't mind driving of where you live, check it out. I mean, people really enjoy having new operators. They have guest lists. You know, they're always willing to teach new people how to do things on the railroad because they want everybody to have a good time. And you might find you really like it. And you know, some of the people you meet can really become great friends. I mean, I've met people now that have become good friends for over 10 years. So hey, go play with some trains, maybe find an ops session, enjoy your hobby. I'll see you next time.